Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Irv Homer Show. It's Friday, December the 12th, 2008. Have to excuse me. It's been a bad day today. Busy day today. Let me put it that way. This afternoon I taped Channel 6 that will be seen this Sunday, the 14th of December at 11:30. And it was quite interesting. And the panel members were Jan Ting, who is a law professor at Temple University. Christine Flowers is an immigration attorney. Nia Meeks is a journalist, and yours truly, Irv Homer, whatever I may be. I'm on the panel, but it was quite exciting, and we hope you enjoy it. Channel 6, you know, is building a new facility, and it's absolutely magnificent. It should be finished, I believe, in about September of next year. By April, most of the building will be completed. It'll be moved in, but the last thing that will go in there will be the news department, and they're quite excited about it over there and quite thrilled about it. That being said, this has certainly been an interesting week, and let me go into the developments that occurred, of course, in the state of Illinois and how it affects the President-elect of the United States. Some of the statements that are made by the media. There has been a feeding frenzy, and I'm sure you've been inundated with it if you follow the news and follow the radio and television and the newspapers as to whether or not Blagojevich, and nobody knows how to pronounce his name accurately, but we all try, is the governor of Illinois, and he allegedly, according to the charges brought against him, that he has been trying to sell the Senate seat that was absent as a result of Barack Obama being selected as President-elect of the United States. And if you know the politics of the state of Illinois, and it was brought up on the panel today, the question has always arisen, ladies and gentlemen, in our country: would you rather have a corrupt administration that gets things done, like the Daley administration, not the present administration, but the father, and oh man, he was the greatest shakedown artist in the world, but Chicago worked. Chicago, I don't know today or not whether it has the Cook County Hospital, which is a city-operated hospital that charges very little money. In fact, if you're poor, it charges nothing. But that hospital was put together, and it was the beacon of the medical profession around the country because of Daley, the governor or the mayor of Chicago. And any deal that was made, any subway that was built, any road that was built, any snow that was removed, any roads that were paved, it went through his office. He knew about it, and he got a cut out of it, and he made no bones about it. But things were done. Well, Philadelphia used to work the same way, and of course, being the oldest one on the panel today, I had to relate to them the days of the old Meehan family in Philadelphia. Os Meehan, who was the sheriff, and the Republican Party controlled the city of Philadelphia. But during the hard times, the Republican Party in Philadelphia with Os Meehan, who we knew because we were from the neighborhood, there was always coal in the poor people's houses, and there was always baskets of food there for those that needed it, and provided the best of services. But it was ruled with an iron fist, and Philadelphia worked under the Republican Party. Make no mistake about it. Oh, there was a lot of complaining and all, but things got done. So then came Dick Richardson and Joe Clark, and suddenly we had a reformed Democrat administration in Philadelphia, and all the local justices of the peace and the local magistrates that you could slip a couple bucks to and get things done as far as having peace in the neighborhood was concerned. You could get a peace bond put on somebody if they raised hell in your neighborhood. Well, it cost a couple bucks, but you got things done. And then when Richardson Dilworth came in and Joe Clark came in and had the Reformed Democrat Party in Philadelphia, nothing got done. If you wanted to get a peace bond against somebody, if a man beat his wife or vice versa, you had to go down to City Hall and make a proposal to the district attorney's office and present facts and evidence, and then maybe after the assistant DA reviews it, then maybe they would issue a peace bond on some hellraiser in the community. And it's still the same way. We have no local jurisdiction in any of these areas here, and it's just a mess. So Chicago works that way, and it always did work that way, and so it doesn't make uh, any surprise to those of us who have followed the politics that this is dirt. Now, I would venture to say that with all of the denials of Barack Obama, since he is part and parcel of the Chicago machine, that he is tainted in some way with this guy. Now, whether he did anything bad or not, I don't know, and it can't be proven. But you must remember that when federal prosecutors go after you, they throw 9 million charges against you. Conspiracy to do this, and this to do that, and this to do the other thing. And then after they get all done, maybe one or two of them stick. So people are all excited right now about how evil this governor is, and they've got him on tape asking for $100,000 or $500,000. And there's no proof yet. Until that evidence is presented, you have even the president-elect Barack Obama wants the governor to resign, and of course the attorney general of Illinois now wants to go into court and get the Supreme Court to have a decision to remove him from office. But he's tenacious; he's not leaving. And I would have to say that I don't care what the federal prosecutor or evidence he would have against me. I want to see it. And I'll stick there. He's got the power, and he still has the power right now to appoint a Senate appointment to replace Barack Obama. And of course, the name Jesse Jackson Jr. came up as the 5th potential candidate to be the senator. And the problem with Jesse Jackson Jr. is not Jesse Jackson Jr. The problem with Jesse Jackson Jr. is Jesse Jackson Sr. And the question is, should the sins of the father pass on to the children? And I say no, unless it can be proven. And there have been criticism of the press conference that Jesse Jackson Jr. held after the announcement was made that the governor was arrested. Many people just said, well, that's just wind dressing. Yeah, he's guilty. We are so fast in this country to prejudge people. It's just mind-boggling to me. And I know in my own experience, and I've mentioned it many times before, in my lifetime I was told to hate the Germans and hate the Russians and hate the Chinese and hate and then I woke up one morning under Jimmy Carter and I had to like the Chinese, but I had to like half the Germans and hate half the Germans. And then when we were allies with the Russians, I now had to hate the Russians. And so somebody's always telling you who to hate. You ever notice that, folks? Everybody tell me who to hate. And so now we've got the same thing now. Anybody whose name is mentioned in this so-called indictment is now suspect. To say that this thing has legs, no question about it has legs. Whether it was illegal or not, who knows until it is proven in court. Was it politically expedient to do it at this particular time during the lag time between the election, November the 4th, and the inauguration on January the 20th? Is it going to taint the Barack Obama administration for the next 4 years? Or was it done for convenience sake? Well, I remember before the election in Philadelphia, they put a bug in John Street's office. The mayor of Philadelphia, for those of you who are not familiar with it, a bug was placed in his office. What were they looking for? Well, they found 2 guys that allegedly did some hanky-panky, and the big guy, who was the real wheeler and dealer in the Philadelphia wiretap of the mayor's office, was a fellow by the name of Ron White, who was an attorney, and he died. And I'm sure that a lot of people were very happy when he died, because he was the guy that was supposedly, according to the federal indictment at that time, he was the guy that had all the connections with the contracts. And at the time, there's a couple guys that I know personally in the street administration, who were in the street administration, who I swear I have no knowledge and no inside knowledge at all, but being astute enough to know how politics works, I can assure you that these guys sang like canaries before the federal prosecutor and gave the prosecutor information that he didn't ordinarily have. So what's going to happen in Illinois, ladies and gentlemen? The Canaries are going to start singing, and the federal prosecutor at that time will take the testimony from the guys who were singing and come up with some type of viable case. I don't know what's going to happen, but I do know one thing. In light of the rest of the world, and I always look at it, how is the rest of the world looking at us? It certainly doesn't give the United States a air of moral authority when we have these type of shenanigans going on. Is it played up and exacerbated by the press? Yes. I mean, the feeding frenzy of the press with the microphones, and you do this, you do that, you do that. Well, that's our job, I guess. I don't know. I've never been one to try to play gotcha with these people. I was more interested in getting factual information as to what they did from research that I did, rather than how to try to grab them for a soundbite. So we can discuss that, and your opinions certainly are welcome here on our chat room here on the Irv Homer Show, or our telephone number. That's 215-253-8877. 215-253-8877. There is a lot, and we'll go to the chat room. We have a line here, a viewer rather. It says, Irv, can you please comment on what you see happening over the next year with the economy? The city and state is broke. Will we survive this downturn? Well, we will survive the downturn. The question is, how are we going to survive it? There's two options that I see, and the one that the government is already implementing, and that is printing as much money as they possibly can to flood the market with false money to make you feel good. The bottom line is, on this thing, my dear viewer, is that the country is broke. The state is broke. The city is broke. Many people still have money. So the difference between what is happening today and what happened during the Depression was, during the Depression, everybody bought what is known as on margin. In other words, the stock market was like your credit card in them days. You didn't have to have any money to back up your bidding or your buying. Well, then when the stock market said, come on, you got to come up, you had 30 days, like the casinos, you get a 30-day line of credit. After 30 days, you got to pay up or they go after you. Well, that's the way it was in 1929 to 1933. Well, you can't buy on margin today. So the real money that is there in the market today at 8,600 is real money. The inflated money over it when it was 14,000, that was fiat money. But there's real wealth there. And people do have managed to save a lot of money in savings accounts and other type of vehicles. However, whether or not the public has saved enough money to ride out the storm, personally, I don't know. One of the things you have to be careful of is that the federal government can only bail out so many people or loan so many people so much money, whether it be the automobile industry, whether it be now the newspapers are looking for some type of financial handout. Everybody's going to say, look, the government cannot discriminate. You're going to bail out the automobile industry, then you ought to bail us out too. We're hurting. Hospitals are hurting. Newspapers are hurting. Television station advertising is down. So there's two schools of thought. One is let the damn thing bottom out and go broke and start over again. The other is let's keep putting Band-Aids on this cancer. And this cancer is capitalism that nobody understands. And this is the true call that was warned about by Lenin, by Marx, by Trotsky, by all the old line communists. You remember when Khrushchev was banging on the table at the United Nations and he said, we're going to hang you with your own rope. Now, whether or not it's an outside conspiracy or not, but Khrushchev from the communist regime in Soviet Union, who has a rigid item government-run economy, knew what was going to happen to the United States. The only people that didn't know about it were the people in the United States. frivolous loans, giving money out to people that had no collateral, people that had no record of payment, no money down. I mean, you don't have to be a rocket scientist, ladies and gentlemen, to be able to see the handwriting on the wall. And where the danger is now, of why it's not going to get any better, is this $250,000 FDIC insured of your savings that are in the bank. That means the bank wants to get as much money back into the system that you may have hidden, or some type of assets you got, or some type of cash reserve. But a bank having the ability given by the government to guarantee $250,000 of your savings means that that bank can once again loan out money frivolously to protect your deposit by government guaranteeing $250,000 per account. That's insanity. When I first learned about how capitalism works, the Federal Deposit Insurance Company only insured your deposits up to $40,000. That meant the banks had a little latitude with risk money or risk loans. Exotic loans were called for, like horse racing. Buy a horse, you want to buy a racehorse, or buy a fancy yacht, or buy something fancy. Then they would venture that $40,000. Then they raise it up to 40,000. What up to? What did it go up to? I have a mental block right now. Well, anyway, now it's up to $200,000. Well, that's craziness. That's craziness. And so this is just a matter of putting Band-Aids on cancer. The cancer has rotted out the capitalist system as we know it in America. And whether the public likes it or not, or whether Barack Obama and the administration he's bringing in knows that you're going to have to change our financial system in this country, as you're going to have to change it around the world, then this country is headed for an economic disaster. The bills are due. You got to pay them. This will take place January the 20th on, and it'll take place when the January credit cards come due. The one thing you have to remember, Rick, or rather from a previous person on the chat room, in none of these discussions, and I'm getting outraged of it. I scream and yell on this segment, but now I'm just tired. I'm tired of it because nobody pays attention. And when you do bring it up, people just, we're spending, the government is sucking out of the economy of this country $10 million a week for the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. $10 million a week. And this has been going on for 8 years. Give or take a couple of months in the beginning of the Bush administration. And I'm not yelling at his Bush's fault. I'm merely pointing out the economics that they're not addressing. The country is broke. We warred ourselves into a depression. We didn't beat the Soviet Union because we had more nuclear weapons. We didn't beat the Soviet Union because they were afraid of our nuclear bombs. We didn't beat the Soviet Union because of Lech Walesa in Poland, or the Pope's influence in Poland to fight communism. The Soviet Union lost because they lost 16,000 men and about $4 trillion in Afghanistan until they were driven out by the Taliban that we helped. And what did we do? Did we learn from that? Did we learn from the fact that the Soviet Union collapsed because it had spent every possible dime or money that they had on weaponry to fight in Afghanistan, to build a defense system, missile launchers, Soviet Navy? That's what killed communism in the Soviet Union. Wasn't the political ramification, or the people in Poland wanted freedom, or the Pope's influence. They spent themselves to death, which destroyed the country, and now they're trying to recoup because of the natural gas and oil resources they have. We have spent ourselves through military invasion for 8 years that were supposed to be, ladies and gentlemen, what was it? A slam dunk, I think Donald Rumsfeld said it was. Remember when we went into Iraq? It's a slam dunk. Well, somebody got dunked and it wasn't slam. We've been dunked. And when the government pulls money out of the private sector to fight a war that you have no return on, what has been our return from the war? Not even a quart of oil. That means it removes the money from the private sector so they can borrow it at a discount rate and continue running their businesses. Now, how much money in the last 8 years has our government under the Bush administration sucked out of the economy to fight this war? When you realize, and I'm not, I really don't give a damn whether you like what I say or not, or how you interpret it. I know how I mean it, and it's not meant to be evil. But the bottom line is that when you realize the arms and legs and limbs that have been lost in this war by our servicemen and women, and it costs $20,000 for a prosthesis, plus the rehabilitation, plus the psychological cost of retraining and regrouping people that are coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan with this delayed stress syndrome. We're not only spending billions of dollars in fighting the war, but we're spending billions of dollars to help the poor servicemen and women that are coming back from this disaster. And when you pull money out of the private economy by government to the tunes of billions of dollars in 8 years, the war has bankrupted this country. There's only so much money they could draw from, so much they could borrow from. And if you go back and check the economic reports during the 8 years of the Bush administration with this war, you'll see that every time he turned around, he wanted another $25 billion, and Congress approved it. Another $50 billion, and Congress approved it. Another $40 billion, Congress approved it. And the reason the Democrats don't say anything about it is because they were complicit in it too. So they can't scream and say that it's George Bush's war, because they were just as guilty as the Republican administration is. They voted every military appropriation under the sun and gave the president the power to conduct this war that bankrupted this country. And while we were spending money, we were borrowing it from the rest of the world. Well, now we can't pay our debt. We don't have any money to pay the Chinese bonds that we have. We don't have any money to pay off Britain. We don't have the money to pay off Germany. So they're going broke because we can't pay our debt. Now, I defy anyone, as I've done on many programs over the years. Tell me where I'm wrong. Show me where did we get the money to fight this war? Had to come from someplace. So we're fighting a war spending gazillions of dollars, sucking the real money out of our economy and replacing it with credit cards for the average consumer, replacing it with credit cards for industry. So there's no money in the well for the 3 automobile manufacturers to borrow from. There's no money there. The government has sucked it all out. There's no money for the newspapers for credit. There's no money for your private businesses to go to the banks, to go to the Wall Street and borrow money. It's not there. They loan it to the government. The government has sucked all of the money out of the private sector and left the private sector scratching its nose and picking its ass. And it's that simple. And it's incumbent upon Barack Obama or the next administration, whether it been Democrat or Republican, to either demand from Iraq that we get some of that oil wealth so we can take and sell it on the open market and replace the money that we spent for that war, or we're going broke. We're going to have the biggest damn depression you've ever seen in your life. You'll see services cut back like you've never seen before. You have to pay attention to the whole picture. People are buying more and more guns. Do they feel safe? Will the average police officer be able to get enough money to be able to protect you? Will there be enough money for police cars? will be enough money to incarcerate criminals? The federal government with this war in 10 years has sucked us dry. There is no money left in the well. And yet not one politician, not one broadcaster is yelling about it, because they can get better headlines from Boobas America screaming about Sarah Palin, or screaming about Barack Obama and his influence with Reverend Wright, or Bill Ayers, or Bernadette Dorn, bada bee, bada boo, bada boo. And that gets Boobas America all stirred up. Gets all stirred up about Boobas America because they want to put "In God We Trust" on a license tag in Missouri someplace. That gets you excited. And that's great, the great radio for all of these bloviators. The real issue is how much money has been sucked out by the government for this war that has gone on longer than World War II. Next question on our... Let's go to the telephone on the Irv Homer Show. Good evening. How are you?
Well, I look for the opportunity, the right opportunity to kind of butt into your
whatever
the statements you've been making, and I don't believe the government wants to fix things. I believe that what's happening is by design. It's being done to us. We are being led right down a path, and they want civil unrest. They want. I think what they ultimately want is that the American people come to the federal government and say, we can't take it anymore. The violence is so bad. Collect the guns from everywhere. Because I'm watching my country bring the Army into the United States. They're on the streets. They're retraining with non-lethal weapons. This is factual now. This is not my opinion. There's going to be 20,000 troops there's calling for in 2011. Well, if they say it's 20,000, it's probably going to be 200,000. And they're getting these troops from the most hardened, battle-ready places in Iraq. They're not pulling them from civilian or from non-combat positions. They're bringing them into America from the worst combat areas, and they're saying we're going to retrain them with non-lethal weapons so that they can help local law enforcement provide help with civil unrest and whatnot. Okay, they're doing it for a reason, and I believe that they want to have martial law. They want to go collect the guns. They want to clamp down. Look, when 9/11 happened there, I called friends of mine. They all called me, and I said, look, you are going to see a ramp up of usurpation of rights in this country like you've never seen before. If you thought that they were slowly boiling the frog, they are going to turn it to a full boil, and no one's going to pay attention. No one's going to make a peep about it, and they're going to do it with impunity, and they've been doing it like that ever since. It's been one thing after another. Do you agree?
Well, I agree that there is a federal police department, and that is in Roanoke, Virginia, and I also believe that both the National Guard and the military is on the alert for civil unrest and civil disobedience, and they're being trained for it. Now, whether it's a conspiracy because the government wants to create this malaise or not, I don't know. But I do know that with the possibility of a disgruntled civilian population in the United States as the economy deteriorates, there will be more and more civil unrest. And it's been the unions have been very calm in this negotiating, and I think it's to the credit of Barack Obama that he hasn't lost his temper yet. He's been very calm. He's been very nondescript in his press conferences. But there's going to be a point, Howard, I think that eventually, unless the government keeps pouring money into extending unemployment compensation, I just got a raise of $161 in my Social Security for next year. So the government is pumping money into the economy to keep it from exploding. If it gets to the point...
Where are they getting the money? You asked the question just earlier.
From the printing presses. From the printing press. From the printing press. They're borrowing it from the Federal Reserve Bank. The Federal Reserve Bank is charging them now 3% interest, I understand. That's the latest figure that the government now borrows money from. But eventually it's all got to be paid. These are entitlements that are really there. There is enough money in the Social Security fund, but the trouble is the government has put IOUs in there and taken the real cash out. So eventually the whole thing will blow up. The entitlements will blow up too. The Medicare will blow up. Medicaid will blow up. It's got to, unless there is a complete turnaround. And of course, people are going to say, well, the government should do it. Well, the government's the one who created this mess in the first place.
And the
And
government is the one that's perpetuating it.
no question,
I want to tell you.
no question about it.
I want to tell you what my prediction is because I think it's probable and it might happen. You had Phil Berg on as a guest a month and a half ago, and you've just seen one of the lawsuits that was brought to the Supreme Court, thrown out by the Supreme Court. They don't want to look at it. But people who have looked at the certificate of live birth that Obama has put forward, have said that it's a forgery. And I've seen the reasons why they say it's a forgery, and it makes sense. And here's my prediction. Somebody has been protecting this Obama from day one.
No
I watched
question.
the YouTube video. A week ago of Obama giving a roast to Rahm Emanuel 4 years ago. 4 years ago, the heir apparent to the presidency was Hillary Clinton, right?
Hmm.
Okay. But they introduced Obama, who had just become a freshman senator, who's done nothing in his career. He was what was he? He was a state representative. Big deal. Okay. They introduced him as, you watch, folks, this is the next president of these United States. This man is going to be your next president. Now, I think Hillary was there. There were other people there. What did this guy know, the one that introduced him? What did he know that we don't know? In other words, I think Obama was chosen. Here's my prediction. I believe that you're going to see a last-minute Supreme Court ruling that's going to possibly remove him from the presidency. You will see riots in America on the scale of Los Angeles like you've never seen in every city of the country. And that will be the thing that's needed from the federal government to come in and go collect the guns. That's my prediction. Now, I might be found wrong in the next week or two, but it's a possibility.
Well,
Because
let me
that birth certificate. Go ahead.
let me extrapolate on what you said. I think that one of the reasons that the Supreme Court has refused to look into the actual birth certificate of Barack Obama is exactly what you said. If it is proven that he has not been vetted properly, if it is proven that he is not eligible to be the President of the United States, there would be a riot the likes of which you've never seen in this country. There you're absolutely right. Now, whether it is done by a conspiracy or not, I don't know. On the panel this week on Inside Story, Christine Flowers is an immigration attorney. And the discussion came up that I brought up. And then off camera, she had mentioned about, well, all the suits were thrown out. I said, are you familiar with the Philip Berg suit? She said, no. I said, well, then they haven't all been thrown out because of all of the frivolous suits that were brought into the court by those opponents of Barack Obama's birth. Philip Berg has the most logical and most evidentiary conclusion of all. It is that year between the 10 years that his mother was supposed to have lived in the United States, as opposed, and he's only lived here, she was only here 9 years.
Footnote, 5 years after the age of 14.
5 years after the age of 14 makes it 19.
Yeah. She has to live here 10 years. 5 of those years have to be after the age of 14.
Now that is Philip Berg's whole argument as far as the legitimacy of Barack Obama's birth. Christine Flowers, who is a pretty sharp gal, she's a journalist, she's an immigration lawyer, wasn't aware of it. So Phil Berg's case has not been dismissed yet. If Barack Obama is removed from office, Howard, you know damn right well there's going to be riots and revolutions in this country. And another thing, my dear friend, if he doesn't become the great Amana, the guy who can walk on water, the second coming of Jesus Christ, after 6 months, if things don't turn around, there'll be riots anyway.
Well, let me throw this last comment to you. If you think about when would be the most effective time to remove him, it would be right before the inauguration. In other words, removing him now may not get the desired results. So you may see the Supreme Court You know, look, maybe this is the conspiracy goes all the way to the top. But here's the other conspiracy.
Well, wait. Let me
You're
let
not
but
reading
keep
about this in the news.
keep that conspiracy in mind. You must remember they're anticipating 4 to 5 million people in Washington D.C. If any, and those reservations are already made, the buses have already been ordered, the hotels and the facilities of living quarters are already established, Howard. If that momentum of that flood into Washington, D.C., and the Washington, D.C. police and security and Homeland Security, they're going crazy. What are they going to do with 4 or 5 million people down there? They're even, it even stated that on the day of the inauguration, you will not be permitted in Washington to get on the quadrangle there until 7 o'clock in the morning. So they're going to have a military presence in Washington to keep those hordes out from getting where the Washington Monument is for that inauguration. It's going to be, it's going to, now, just think if prior to the inauguration, when all of those people are there waiting to get in for the, if suddenly it comes down that he is removed, there would be, the country, it would blow up, Howard. They've got to let this guy stay in, not because he deserves to be the president, but because they couldn't stop it.
Well, you're only going to have it two ways. You're either going to have that they want to cause a constitutional crisis and the ensuing melee that would be the result of that constitutional crisis, or the Supreme Court, you're right, is not taking it because they don't want to create a constitutional crisis.
Well, wait a minute. Let's add to the possible conspiracy on this, okay? What better way for government intervention in the lives of 300 million people than with a potential riot of the Barack Obama inauguration to impose some type of FEMA action in which all money would be frozen, your assets would be frozen, and FEMA, you know, if you read the FEMA law or the executive order, they can limit you to taking out $200 a week from your bank. You could have $100 million in there, but you'd only permitted to take $200 or $300 a week out. It would be a great way to get out of this financial malaise by declaring a national emergency because of the potential of riots.
Yeah, but hold on. You already know we're under national emergency now.
Sure.
You know full well that since 1933, the United States of America has been under emergency rule. The Senate put out a proclamation about it in 1972. I have a copy of that document. They said quite clearly that Americans have been living, I'm paraphrasing, but it's pretty close, that Americans have been living under under constitutional restrictions as never before.
Well, if you take a look, Howard, if you take a look at the powers that were given under the Homeland Security Act, you can see that a lot of FEMA has been subrogated and given the power to the executive office. So you're absolutely right. With Homeland Security, we're already under the Federal Emergency Management Act.
Yes, and what I forgot to mention was, and you just mentioned it, I believe under the Military Commissions Act, did they not remove the power over the National Guard from the governors and give it to the federal government? Because I believe Bush has that control now, not the governors.
No, Howard, it's always a pleasure. Good conversation. Thank you, sir.
What
do you say?
Sorry, Howard.
Okay, let's go to our chat room. My name is Irv Homer. We're broadcasting from irvhomer.com. My website is www.irvhomer.com, and Christine complimented you, Ron, today on the website. She checks it almost daily.
Oh, well, thank you.
You can email me at evilirv@irvhomer.com, and we welcome your email. To the chat room, we go, Irv, do you think we are merely seeing what really goes on behind the scenes with all politicians and picking candidates? No, my dear friend. Rick and Percy, we don't know the half of how politics works. I've said many, many times, and I say it again, the most important election that we have in America is the primary election. And why do I say that? Because that is the election of selection. When you have the primary election, you have all of the candidates lined up there in a row. And it is incumbent upon selecting the candidate either for the Republican Party or the Democrat Party that you want to lead your country. What has happened is most people cast aside the primary election. And one of the reasons is because we have these closed primaries. If you're a Republican, you can only vote for a Republican candidate. If you're a Democrat, I believe that it should be mandatory that all primary elections be open, so that if you're a registered Republican, you can vote for a Democrat candidate for president and vice versa. If you're a Democrat and you see a Republican one. But when you take a look, in all honesty, and I don't want to call names on this program, I'm trying to try to temper it a little bit. But when you take a look at the four leading candidates to lead this country in the middle of a war, in the beginning of a depression that they saw coming with the dot-coms and all the other things prior to the Bush administration, and the best and the brightest that we could pick as president and vice presidential candidate of the United States is a young guy by the name of Barack Obama that is still wet behind his ears, and Joe Biden, whose ears are already moldy and they've been so wet, on the Democrat side. And with all due respect to John McCain, an old fart like John McCain and the crazy lady from Alaska who sees Russia from her back porch. Now, these are the qualifications. This is the selection that we had, ladies and gentlemen, on both the Republican and the Democrat side, to lead us in a time when this country needs leadership, it needs intellect, it needs a cohesive spokesperson, it needs one of intelligence, somebody who knows how this country works, somebody who is respected among the world leaders. And I'll tell you one thing, I think they ought to throw them all out and draft Bill Clinton to come back again and give him all the hookers he wants to in the White House. At least we were safer than we are now. Mike from Pennsville, our chat room is open for you. Our telephone number is 215-253-8877. What are your thoughts about using the money from the bank bailout to assist the auto industry? I don't have any thoughts on it. I think they ought to, by all means, not give it to them and not let them go into bankruptcy. I looked at the Constitution of the United States this afternoon prior to taping Inside Story at Channel 6, and I saw nothing in there that gives the government the right to take your money and my money and bail anybody out of anything. And until I know who the boards of directors are of the three major automobile manufacturing companies, I want to make sure that none of them are there before they get one dime of my tax dollars. We hear about the heads of the automobile companies, and there is a proposal for a car czar. Why did they come up with, we have a drug czar, we have an education czar? Are we that desperate to come up with a name for someone to lead an industry, the car czar? I thought he was the head of Afghanistan. Oh, that's Karzai, isn't it? Karzai could be the car czar. And imagine a person like Lee Iacocca I would trust. I'm going to trust Nancy Pelosi and I'm going to trust Harry Reid to run the automobile industry after they ran the country the way they've done since the Democrats won? Are you kidding? I wouldn't give the automobile companies a dime. First of all, we got too many varieties of automobiles. Who needs 10 million gazillion designs from General Motors? And if you talk about General Motors, this is a company that wanted to establish a monopoly in the automobile industry. Chrysler manufactures Chrysler. Then they got Jeep. Chrysler used to manufacture Chrysler. Packard used to manufacture Packard. Nash used to manufacture Nash. We had independent automobile companies competing in the open market for the consumer to buy that car. Now, if you want a car, prior to the invasion of the Japanese market, you had to buy from General Motors. A monopoly. A Pontiac. A Chevrolet. A Cadillac. You had to go through the whole line of General Motors cars. Chrysler did the same thing with the Plymouth. Chevy, General Motors used to have an Oldsmobile. The Oldsmobile died. Pontiac. And do we have a shortage of cars? Do we have a shortage of cars? Ride by Reedman Toll on Route 1 and see the automobiles that are up there. What do they do with those old automobiles? They're using natural resources, burning up steel, burning up plastic, and you know, all the plastic that is, all that fiberglass, that plastic that's in a car is oil derivative. Used to make cars from steel. Now they make out of plastic. So we don't need any more cars. We don't need to save this auto industry. If the people want automobiles, they'll buy them. If they don't want them, they say, okay, we'll lease them to you now. No, I don't think we should bail out the automobile industry. I know there's going to be a lot of people that will be hurt. But that's the name of the game. Under capitalism, you have to learn there is no such thing as job security. You don't have job security under capitalism. So you're either going to have a state capitalist country in which the state will dictate where you're going to work, we'll subsidize you if you go bad, or you're going to have a free market enterprise thing that is bound to fail. It's got to fail. Capitalism cannot work. It don't work. This is a classic example of capitalism run amok. Because once I get all the money gets sucked out of the game by the government, there's no more money left to play the game. So now the government has to create new money. I'll make it simple for you. You have 5 guys playing poker, okay? Each guy has $5 in the beginning of the game. And the game goes on, this guy wins, Before you know it, one guy has all $25. Game's over, right? Well, no, let's keep the game going. Okay? Then the guy with the $25, he loans back money to the other 4 players. Well, now that's not good enough. So the guy that was the big boy, he says, let me create some more money. So he creates some more money and keeps the game going. Well, eventually he ends up with all the money again. So he prints more money to keep the game going. He ends up with all the money again. And this game has been going on. This is the way capitalism works. Now, because of this war and other debts that this government imposed on us, both Democrat and Republican, there's no more money. They've sucked it dry. They've used it on all kind of crazy things. $250,000 to study the sex life of the baboon. I'm worried about this. Take a look at some of the money that has been spent on frivolous loans and grants and earmark. What do they call them? Earmark. What the hell is an earmark? Wasted money is what it is. Martin Gross, who is one of the greatest economists this country ever had, wrote many, many books on the waste of government. Government against industry against government fraud. Many, many books Martin Gross wrote. Those books spell out where the government takes the money and just literally throws it away. Ted Stevens, the senator from New York, guilty of wasting money. We've got right here in the Philadelphia area, we got a bridge, the Betsy Ross Bridge. Who needed it? Who needed the Betsy Ross Bridge? But some politician got on. We need a Betsy Ross Bridge. We need access from Aramingo Avenue. So we got a bridge there. Nobody uses it. We have highways. Woodhaven Road goes into a dirt pile. Goes into a dirt pile. The government waste has sucked the game dry. Now that the game is dry, what do you do about it? You take the hit and start over again with new money. New money created by the Congress of the United States and take it away from the private bank, the Federal Reserve Bank. And until that's done, this is just a Band-Aid. And people are going to be hurt in certain areas of the country. There will be certain depressed areas, distressed areas. We're going to have the old farmer once again with the Dust Bowl. We're going to have the people living in torn out houses. And do you see what's happening now with the houses that are up for sale throughout Florida and Texas? the illegal immigrants are now busting into them houses and moving into them and stealing electricity and stealing power and water from the community. But let's talk about one other thing about the automobile business, the automobile manufacturing, the automobile travesty. I'm basically a person who has been both an employer and an employee. Now, I don't know how many people that I was on the panel with today ever had to pay people to work for them. I doubt it very much. That's no reflection on them, but from what I understand, they all work for somebody else. So I've been on both sides of the coin. And I believe there should be a fair wage for a fair day's work, and I am entitled to a fair profit for my services or my investment. I never had a contentious situation with my employees. I wanted my employees to produce a day's work so I could have a day's profit so I could pay them and pay them well. Pay them more than the scale. If I made it, they made it. It's that simple. But let's take a look at the comparisons between what the automobile worker in Illinois makes versus the salary that the automobile worker in Tennessee and Alabama work. Senator Shelby was on television this morning at a news conference, and he's criticizing the exorbitant salary that the union workers in Illinois make compared to the salary that the automobile workers in Honda and Kia and the other Honda and what's the other Japanese automobile? It escapes me right now. What is it? Toyota? Yeah, Toyota. In Tennessee, thank you. In Tennessee and Alabama. Why didn't the reporter, who probably didn't know or couldn't conceive, ladies and gentlemen, that the cost of living in the state of Illinois is 2.5 times higher than the cost of living in Tennessee and Alabama? And so proportionally, capitalism says if the cost of living is here, then to live in that area you must have a comparable income. So to live in Illinois, where the major automobile manufacturing plants were located, it was necessary for the people there, the automobile workers, to receive higher compensation for doing the same thing that the automobile worker was doing on the Toyota, on the Honda, and the Kia in Alabama and in Tennessee. A home that sells for the worker up in Detroit, Illinois, and the surrounding area where they live is about half as much or half the time more than the house, the same comparable house in Tennessee or Alabama. So you can't compare the two incomes unless you compare the cost of living. And that is why many, many people that work in New York live in Pennsylvania or North Jersey. They can't afford to live in New York because the cost of living up there is high. However, the people that work in New York get a higher salary than the people who work in Philadelphia. The cost of living in Philadelphia is less, so the lawyers here make less, the real estate commissions are less. You live in New York, the cost of living is higher, ergo you make more money. Now, why this idiot Shelby and why these idiot reporters don't reflect that the cost of living is an inherent part of what a worker's income is, I don't know. But I want you people listening to this program tonight to understand the difference. If you remember, there was a big, I guess it was an exodus of Philadelphia, the Northeast corridor industry going to the south many years ago. They located the hosiery mills there, the clothing factories. Why? Two things. Number one, the cost of living was less down there. They got tax incentives from the states. And the cost of living was less. So when you hear these boobuses on television, on radio, and in the newspaper, and some of the congressmen and senators themselves making stupid and dumb remarks, Analyze it a little bit with your head. Say, why would a worker in Detroit or in Chicago make more money than a guy working in Raleigh, North Carolina? Well, Raleigh, North Carolina, ladies and gentlemen, is inexpensive to live. I know. I had a home in Delaware for 18 years. The cost of living 135 miles from where I'm broadcasting tonight was 2/3 less than what it cost me to live here. So it wasn't necessary for me to make the income. The idiots on radio and television, did they think their brothers, because they do the 11 o'clock news in Raleigh, North Carolina, make $800,000-$900,000 a year like they do here in Philadelphia? Do you think a journalist that writes for a newspaper here in Philadelphia makes the same money as somebody who works in Greensboro, North Carolina, doing the same job as a journalist? Of course not. Because the cost of living down there is so much less, they don't demand a higher salary. And that's why the workers that are working at Toyota and Honda and Kia in Tennessee and Alabama make less money than the worker in Chicago and in Detroit. Irv, a follow-up question. If the government was interested in stimulating the economy and helping out business, why don't they simply enact a 6-month tax moratorium and let the workers take home their gross pay? Whatever they do, Mike, is going to be a Band-Aid. It's going to be a Band-Aid. Because all the road to hell is paved with good intentions. When people were making money, they didn't save it. They didn't make themselves aware. A 6-month tax moratorium will only mean this: that after the moratorium is over, they're going to have to make up the difference someplace. For example, one of the questions that came up today on the panel was, the state of Pennsylvania has got a $1.6 billion budget shortfall. And the governor said he's not going to raise taxes, not going to impose new taxes, but he's depending on selling mineral rights and oil drilling rights, and also assuming he's going to get $470 million from the federal government. So there won't be a tax increase on the state. But look at it logically. When the federal government gives money to the states then pass that saving on to the municipalities and the local jurisdictions. Now, the federal government cuts back on, so if the state of Pennsylvania don't get the $570 million, that money's got to come from someplace. So Rendell, as the governor, said, no, I'm not going to impose any new state taxes. So my local municipality here is going to say, well, we're not getting federal money, we're no longer getting state money, but we still have to provide services. So you're going to get screwed. You are going to get screwed. It's a matter of passing the buck down. And so no matter whether or not they give a 6-month tax moratorium or not, it sounds good. They do it in New York during this time between Thanksgiving and I think Christmas Eve. New York City used to have no sales tax to stimulate Christmas sales. What happened? In January, they raised the rate on the subway system. So you can't take from this hand and not pay this hand. It isn't going to work. It will be a feel good. But in closing, ladies and gentlemen, remember this. You can't have honest government with dishonest money. You can't have a government that for 8 years, while we were partying with the football games, with the sports bars, with the lottery, with the reality shows, with Dancing with the Stars, and the government is spending $10 million a week fighting a war while you were sleeping, they broke the bank. We're out of money. We don't got it anymore, and we're still in the war. That ought to be a song. We don't got it anymore, and we're still in the war. I wouldn't want to be Barack Obama or anybody in the federal administration after January the 20th for the life of me. Have a great weekend. Until Monday, this is Irv Homer. I ain't got nothing more to say.